need anything from me, you guys do it from the private chat.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the second webinar in the Thrive Building Thriving Workplaces event series. This series is a partnership between the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce and the United Way of Southern Maine. It brings together community leaders to discuss pressing issues that are impacting our community and a place to share workplace best practices that will benefit your organization and advance Thrive 2027. Thrive 2027 represents 3 10-year goals created by and for our community. You'll hear from Quincy Hansel in a moment, who will share more about this important work and how the Chamber is a partner in these efforts to help advance these goals and to strengthen our community. But before we dive in, I wanted to take a minute to review some housekeeping items for this event. Like all Chamber virtual events, today's presentation is free and it will be recorded and made available for free replay on the Chamber's website and YouTube pages. To keep up to date on all Chamber news and events, please visit our website, portlandregion.com, and check out our events page and sign up for our weekly email newsletter while you're there. Now, during today's presentation, if you have questions for our presenters, please place them in the YouTube chat box and they will be conveyed to our moderator. Now, at this time, I'm happy to turn things over to Quincy Hansel, CEO of the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Tommy. And thank you all for joining us this morning. This topic is obviously important to all of you. It's very important to us at the Chamber as well. So it's great to have you here with us today. I have had the great pleasure of serving on the Thrive 2027 Council for several years now. And I believe that the Chamber's involvement and thereby the business community's involvement is critical to the success of this community commitment. Thrive has identified 3 10-year goals to drive both measurable and meaningful change in Greater Portland. And all 3 goals have a direct impact on the employer community and our greatest asset, which is our employees. The 3 Thrive goals are: 1, children having a strong start so they are reading at grade level by the end of 3rd grade. 2, providing the education and employment opportunities people need to live and work in Greater Portland. And 3, improve people's health so they live longer, healthier lives. All 3 of these goals are focused on ensuring everyone in our communities have the ability to thrive and to have the support and the tools to find financial stability for themselves and their families. Now, today's topic is narrowly focused on the need for quality and affordable childcare and how investing in the workforce behind the workforce and supporting job-seeking parents and caregivers is crucial for stable employment. Over the last 2 years, the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce has worked with Starting Strong, which is a Portland-based coalition focused on establishing the building blocks for lifetime learning. And we've been talking to our members about the impact of the child care crisis on the business community in our state. Now, what we have found by surveying businesses, well, it was shocking at the time, it's probably not so shocking now, but Maine's current child care system does not meet the needs of our state's children, families, or businesses. 61% of our members in the Greater Portland region have reported that their employees are having significant challenges finding childcare. 75% of our members have said their employees experience unplanned work absences due to the lack of childcare, and nearly half say that the lack of childcare has caused issues when it comes to employee retention. In order for Maine to recover financially from the pandemic and continue to grow economically, it is clear that we need to ensure that parents in the workforce have access to high quality, affordable childcare. If we do not make this a reality, we will continue to see employers and employees struggle, and the current workforce crisis will only grow bigger. So with that, I would like to turn this over to Dan Coyne, who is the Senior Vice President of Community Impact and Finance at the United Way of Southern Maine, to moderate our conversation today.
Thank you, Quincy. Hello, everyone, and welcome again. United Way mobilizes community resources to address our most pressing needs. And we're particularly proud to use this expertise to lead our community's shared vision that you heard Quincy talk about, Thrive 2027, a set of 3 goals that promise to give kids a strong start, empower our neighbors to thrive, not just survive, and help us all live longer, better. Today, we're shining a bright spotlight on the important issue of childcare, which is critical to not only giving kids that strong start, but empowering our neighbors to thrive. As many of you know, the critical childcare system was already fragile and headed toward crisis even before the pandemic. But the pandemic has made the issue of affordable and accessible childcare exponentially worse. Across Maine, the permanent closures of 187 childcare centers between April 2020 and September 2021, a lack of certified providers, and increased costs of childcare operators have dramatically impacted children, families, and our economy. We know high-quality childcare is essential for a vibrant, thriving community. It provides a powerful pathway to growing the human capital of a prosperous and sustainable community. It strengthens the workforce and local economy by allowing parents to work, to go to school or receive training, and ultimately pay their bills. It also provides young children with experiences that support school readiness and nurtures their cognitive, social, and emotional growth. The bottom line, we all benefit when kids have a strong start and families thrive, and we all lose when they don't. Extraordinarily impressive panel to help us better understand the issue and illustrate how families and businesses can thrive when they prioritize childcare. So without further ado, our Mount Rushmore of panelists this morning include Camelia Babson-Haley, the Executive Director of Youth and Family Outreach, Matt Dubell, the Executive Director of Portland Connect Ed, Joe Cassidy, the President of Southern Maine Community College, Kwame Yeboah, the Senior Project Manager with the Greater Portland Workforce Initiative, which is housed at United Way of Southern Maine, and Steve DeCastro, the President and CEO of Gorham Savings Bank. Thank you, panelists, for being here this morning. And let's jump right in. Camelia, I'd love to begin with you. Could you please describe how COVID has exacerbated pre-existing challenges with early childcare and how you and YFO are finding solutions, especially through collaborating with others?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I could probably fill the whole hour. It's a big topic, and it's one that, we have been talking about, brainstorming, strategizing around for, more than 2 years now. But I'll try to be concise. There are several key challenges that we in the early childhood community were experiencing prior to the pandemic, but COVID just highlighted those and showed the cracks in the foundation of the workforce, which is childcare. Without childcare available in 2020, people could not return to work. And it highlighted the similarities between federally funded schools, K-12, and early childhood education, both being utilized for the same reasons: parents to work and children to learn. At YFO, our wait lists grew longer, desperation has shown, and staffing has been affected. And the challenges of finding affordable, high-quality childcare has always been an issue for certain groups, particularly those that are Black, Indigenous, or people of color, and low income and poor families. And this has also affected women on a disproportionate level, as it was women primarily who left the workforce to provide care for the children during the global pandemic. Our expansion and many other efforts going on around the city will help to address this. But with 71% of all adults in the home working, and I think in Cumberland County, that number is closer to 76%, it will not solve it. And if that many caregivers are working with 77,000 children, and when I say caregivers, I mean parents, with 77,000 children under the age of 6 in the state, the math just doesn't work. Families suffer, children suffer, and our economy suffers. We're all collectively healing from the life disruption that COVID is and how the world has changed in many other ways since COVID. It's become increasingly difficult for staff and families to manage the same expectations held before COVID because there has been a huge shift in everyone's normal. Staff and families need more sick time and need to be paid more to afford the rising costs of life. Stability is the route to overcoming trauma. We're encouraged by everything happening at the federal and state level to recognize the early years as a public good. We've known for decades that the return on investment is huge, speculated to be at about $16 for every dollar spent, because brain connections are being built. We save on special ed services, we increase the rate of graduation, and we lower incarceration rates when we invest in the early years. It's a relief to finally see some action, like the $12 million in the governor's budget to elevate wages for early childhood providers. We can't place the burden on families, and it seems our politicians are collectively understanding that. We're finding solutions through collective advocacy that you'll hear more about today, and community-wide efforts to strengthen the early childhood workforce and implement programs to support expansions like the one at YFO. However, childcare needs to be funded by all interested and affected parties, nationally, locally, and within our community, and parents. Like I said, there's probably a lot more that could be said, but I think I'll pause there.
Great, thanks, Camille. And I'm sure with some Q&A as we get down, there'll be more opportunity to dig deep on anything you just spoke about. So thank you. And Matt, I'd love to turn to you. Some might think of childcare as being an issue only for our youngest children, but we know the need remains for school-age children. Could you talk about the challenges and effective solutions you're seeing for school-age children?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Good morning, everyone. So, the challenge, as you said, remains as kids get older, but it takes a different kind of shape, because often the kind of care that parents are looking for is around the school calendar. So before school, after school, vacation weeks, summer. And I would just start by saying, a big thank you to Camellia and her colleagues in the early care and education sector, because it is their work that is the foundation for us to even be able to talk about then the success of school age kids. So all of this lays on that early care foundation. But when families, and probably many viewers have experienced this, when in the school age years, families are often sort of patching together different resources to find the care they need. And so, of course, there are early childhood providers who also do school age care. And I'll just note, as a resource for folks, the best way to find those providers is the state Childcare Choices website. So if you go to childcarechoices.me, that takes you to a directory of providers, and you can enter your address, you can click school age, or if you have younger kids, you can click, infant, toddler, and it pulls up a list of providers who take that age children. So that's a great resource. The other thing that's great for families to know about, and for employers, a lot of your families may be eligible for this program, the Maine Childcare Subsidy program, which actually covers all the way from birth up to through age 12. So it is available to help support the cost of school age care as well as early care and education. And there's pretty broad eligibility for that. So it's actually pitched at about 85% of median income. So a family of 4, for example, earning $76,000 would still be eligible for that subsidy. And that can help cover the cost of care across the range of ages, including for school age. A lot of folks with school age kids aren't aware of that. Beyond the childcare providers, of course, there's a wide sort of range of youth program providers who parents often turn to for programming that can provide care, as well as enrichment and academic support and many other things in the after school and summer and vacation spaces. And the challenge that a lot of folks experience is that there are often so many options out there that it is tough to sort of zero in on what works best for your child or works best for your needs, let alone to find affordable options, because many of these programs are tuition based. And so one thing we've done in the Portland area is we've brought together a coalition of out of school time providers who have launched a clearinghouse website. It's portlandyouth.org, nice and easy to remember. And it's just a clearinghouse so that parents can have a kind of one-stop shop to go and find that kind of out-of-school time programming. And the search is really based around the kinds of needs that parents are experiencing. So you can go in and search on the age group for your child, but you can also search for, what you're looking for. Is it before school, after school, summer, vacation weeks? And it's a work in progress because we're growing all the time in the number of program providers who are part of this, but we're trying to really build that as a place where parents can have an easy way to find what they're looking for, and frankly a way to find what they can afford. Because one of the things you can search for on the site is, you can ask to pull up all the programs that provide financial aid, or even all the programs that are free, because we are lucky enough to have some free options that are provided. So that's a great resource for folks who are in the Portland area. Also in Portland, I'll just highlight as a great example of folks coming together across sectors to collaborate on behalf of families is for the past 2 summers, Portland Public Schools have collaborated with over 24 youth program providers to provide free summer programming for students in Portland Public Schools. And so for folks who are in Portland, that process is still ongoing. Actually, you have until June 1st to apply to take advantage of this. And we'll make sure to get that. There's a website you can go to. We'll get that link out to folks in the follow-up to this webinar. If you are in Portland, and if you aren't, I think it's a great model for other school districts to think about, because it's done using federal ESSER funds, which were broadly distributed. And it really just says to folks, look, the learning and growth of your kids, as well as the care that they need, doesn't stop when the school year stops. And so as a community, we're going to work together to try to find options for families that extend into the summer. And I'll just note one more thing, if folks on the webinar are thinking about sort of with your employer hat on, if you're thinking about what you can do for employees who have school-age kids, I think the biggest benefit for parents is flexibility. There is obviously a lot of schedule complexity when children get into the school age years. And as I mentioned, parents are often patching together these different sources of care to make it all work for them. So the more employees can be flexible, I think the more likely parents are going to be able to thrive in the workplace. And frankly, we're going to be able to retain parents in the workplace.
Great. Thank you, Matt, for that rich answer. President Cassidy, I'd love to turn to you. We know childcare can impact students and their ability to continue with their studies. Could you talk about what Southern Maine Community College is doing to support students with childcare needs, but also what the college is doing on the workforce development front as it connects to childcare?
I'd be happy to, Dan, and good morning. Good morning to everybody, and thank you for including me in the discussion. I will wander a little before I get to the gist of Dan's question. Many friends on the panel here, and I don't know if I've ever shared this with you. I ran the early childhood education program at Washington County Community College for a decade. And so I have a bit of a background with ECE, both the preschool setting and the school setting. And it's such a wonderful development to see that the conversation has changed. And the fact that we're sitting here in an event sponsored by the Chamber to think about how we can together bring partners to the table to solve this very important challenge is just wonderful to me. So I start with that. And then the other thing that I would note is that I will talk about students in a minute, Dan, but SMCC is an employer too. And we've got about 600 employees. And this challenge has been at the forefront of us trying to support our employees during the pandemic. But now, as we come out of it, it's still an issue. So, Matt just mentioned flexibility, and I really urge all of us to be as flexible as we can as employers to support these families. Quincy did a great job at the outset talking about the statistics and the challenge that parents faced during the pandemic, the height of that, and continue to face in terms of being employees. That very same pressure, that very same headwind has just knocked the dickens out of our students. And so, you can imagine at the community colleges, we certainly serve lots of traditional aged college students, but a majority of our students across the MCCS, all of the 7 colleges of the system, are non-traditionals. And those include many, many parents, both men and women, single parents and partnerships. And so when the pandemic really leveled us, it absolutely eviscerated enrollment among non-traditionals. And as you would imagine, we were communicating a great deal with students as they were leaving to see if we could support them, if there were things we could do to sort of save the day for them. And the number one by far development that was pushing them away from their education was a lack of quality childcare during the daytime. So that need really took the wind out of our sails together with our students. So in the last 2 years, we've been very busy, and much of this predates pandemic too. We've recognized the importance of this issue for our students for many years, and we've got a host of different things that we do, including we use scholarship monies, and scholarship not in the traditional sense of the word. We take money, we award it to students to pay for their childcare. We've got a program that is supported by the state, honestly, with gaming funds that goes directly into students' pockets to help them pay for those types of expenses, et cetera. And we use every dollar we have every year, and we could spend 10 times that amount to support students. So one of the things, in thinking about partnerships, and as we eventually get to how can we all help, is that let's look to fund ways to put, to support organizations, several of which are represented here. How do we get those monies directly into the hands of students? Meaning the adult student who's got the children at home, but wants a better life for her and her kids, or he and his children. So that's critical. We also have worked to change schedules to be able to offer classes when parents might have a better chance of getting support at home. Doing the traditional daytime class is a real challenge if somebody must be at work, or once their kid comes out of school, evening can be a challenge depending on the family setup. So we really try to offer lots of opportunities for students and making sure that we can help them find the right times for their classes. We continue to just support one another in that way. And then maybe as importantly as that, it's hard for me to get past the immediacy of the need that our students have. But when I think about the bigger picture is, even if we have the money for those students, they may or may not have a viable opportunity to place their kids in a way that can help them as a student or as an employee. So I think the community college system has a really important role as we develop that workforce that you alluded to, Dan. I'm so happy, as Camelia mentioned earlier, to see the state sort of investing and looking to raise the wages of childcare workers. And yet we've got to balance that with affordability. So, I think we often hear the phrase, 2 things can be true. And this is a case where we collectively have got to find a way to make this an industry that provides not only a living wage, but a wage that's appealing to a young person or not so young person to say, I want to be an educator of young children, perhaps in the preschool setting, and I can make a living doing that. At the same time, we've got to make sure we bring public supports to bear so that the affordability for parents is also achieved. And hey, that's a steep hill to push the rock up, but we can do it. Mainers are renowned for our creativity and our ingenuity, and I know that we can achieve this thing. So we continue to run early childhood education programs at each of our colleges across the state. I'm very proud of the program here at SMCC, and we're able to put out well-trained young women and men who are ready to go to work and to support this industry. But we could do so much more with more resources, and we'll continue to work to get those. But another new addition is that the governor's office and the legislature have supported us with monies to expand workforce training. And so we have opportunity right now and are taking advantage of that to do shorter term trainings for early childhood practitioners, so that maybe it isn't the full degree initially, but we can get them a modicum of talent, get them out into the workforce where they can begin to make a good wage, and then come back to us and study towards their degrees as they're ready to do that. So we'll continue to hit it on multiple fronts, and we'll continue to advocate for strong partnerships across the state. And candidly, we've got some of our great partners right here on the call. So with that, I'll stop yammering, and again, thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning.
Thank you, President Cassidy, and thanks for sharing that early part of your biography. I had not realized that, and that's useful for sure. So with these growing challenges that have been articulated, it's clear that investing in the workforce behind the workforce, so to speak, is clearly crucial for stable employment. Kwame, could you talk about what some other community solutions are that can be used to address the childcare workforce?
Yes, Dan. Well, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. My name is Kwame Yeboah, and I'm with GPWI, which is Greater Portland Workforce Initiative. So, of course, I'm going to talk about some of the community interventions that are currently happening, and I would focus specifically on the intervention by GPWI. And someone would ask, what is GPWI, and what do we do, and how do we do it? So GPWI basically is what we call the Collective Impact Initiative. And what that means is that, we bring, stakeholders from all sectors, together. And the goal is to find solutions to Portland or Greater Portland's workforce challenges. Our ultimate goal is to make sure that every member of the community is prepared for and connected to all the growing sectors of employment with family-sustaining wages. And GPWI works, within United Way, and we are basically stationed within United Way, and we try to address the goal 2 needs, which is empowering our neighbors to thrive, socially, economically. So the 2 programs that I'm going to talk about are the Bridge to CDA and also the recent program that we launched, which is the Childcare Incubator program. And some of you may have already heard about that. So the Bridge to CDA program. Now, what is CDA? CDA is Child Care Development Associate Credentialing Program. And what that means is that, in Maine, of course, in order to become, a childcare worker, you would have to go through certain training and processes and become credentialed before you can start working in such an environment. And so there are a lot of candidates or members of the community who have barriers, real barriers that hinder them from actually accessing some of these training opportunities. So we created a very unique program, the Bridge to CDA program, and the goal is to pick those candidates and look at the barriers that affect, their mobility, and basically help address those barriers. And so we do work with partners such as Portland Adult Education, the childcare providers such as, Camellia's Youth and Family Outreach Program, and Starting Strong, among others. It's a collective impact work. And so we bring all these people together and we create a program. And the goal is basically to prepare individuals to work within an early childcare and education setting. And so far, we do have about 13 candidates in various, stages of completion in the program. As I said, we do have many partners that we work with. Portland Adult Education is where the candidates go for training. And of course, the Opportunity Alliance is there as well. In addition to that, recently we launched the Childcare Business Lab, or the Childcare Incubator program. And, why did we launch that? We realized that a lot of, businesses or a lot of childcare businesses have folded, due to COVID, but also in general, just the profit margin of businesses, childcare businesses is very low. And so entry is really hard for many community members. In order to address some of those challenges, we launched what we call the Childcare Incubator Program. And the goal is basically to, have enough in-home family childcare businesses for members of our community, And if you listen to some of our panelists, some of the challenges that they address is just a long wait list, right? And so there are folks with children willing to, enter the system, available to enter the system. But then the long waiting list just, makes it really hard. And for candidates such as, or for parents, who are people of color, who just find it hard to sort of access some of these benefits or, online and do all these complex processes, sometimes, they fall behind and, their kids are then burdened with them, and then they have to stay at home or find, different difficult means of taking care of their kids whilst, participating in the workforce. And so this program that we're launching is basically a step in that direction. We hope that about 10 to 15 candidates, drawn from the community will join this program. And imagine if we have about, say, 10 candidates, each finishing this program and then starting, say, 10 businesses, and each of them, of course, hiring about 10 children, we're looking at about, 100 kids so far. And this, although it's a small step, we think that it's one of the potent interventions to help address the childcare program crisis that is ongoing in Maine, but also around the country. So GPWI uses very innovative or creative approaches in its work, and we use industry standards or what we call the best practices. That involves not just one entity, but then a collective of entities coming together to help address these challenges in a holistic way. The candidates or the populations that we deal with tend to come from low-income families, the homeless, folks re-entering the community from incarceration. We do have new immigrants, new Mainers, are all part of this process. And so the programs all have English language components to them, because we realize that one of the main barriers for participation, apart from childcare, is also that folks just have limited English, in order to participate in the regular classes. And so we incorporate those programs into the intervention to enable them, gradually transition to, acquiring their certification. So of course, there are many interventions in the community, but these are just two that, time would afford me to mention. So thank you.
Thank you, Kwame, for that rich answer as well. The pandemic has certainly shed new light on the intertwined nature of childcare and economic stability, and it's the lifeline for working families, as we've discussed, particularly some of the underserved populations that Kwame mentioned, for them to be able to stay employed. Steve, could you talk about the benefits of investing in childcare from a business perspective?
Yeah, sure. Happy to, Dan, and good morning, everybody. From a practical standpoint, you heard some of the statistics from Quincy early on from the really great survey that the Chamber did around, the percentages of businesses that have employees struggling to find care, and also the disruption that results from childcare issues. There is some national data around that topic, and nationally, there's an estimate that the lost sort of productivity that results from limited childcare is $57 billion, which is obviously a huge number. It's a significant number estimated in Maine too. It's $180 million a year in losses. So again, from a practical standpoint, that's a very compelling reason to look to invest in this area. I think closer to home for me, from an emotional standpoint, I've experienced over the past year talking to several of our employees at Gorham Savings Bank, at a time when they're starting a family, their, hope and happiness should be at its peak. the main thing on their mind is how are they going to be able to, have appropriate childcare for their newborn. So the stress that results is tremendous. Obviously mental health has been a big issue throughout the pandemic, and certainly child care issues add to that picture. So that's a big concern. And that conversation happens without even any discussion around quality. It's really just about trying to get coverage. And so from my perspective, that's as equal of a challenge here with the childcare picture. So businesses, we obviously, if you've seen the numbers, the access to the employment pool is very limited. And again, the childcare component has added significantly to the constraints on available employees, and has made it really hard for us and for others to find qualified employees to work. And I'd like to just circle back again to one other element around quality, which is, we're talking today about what we face in the immediate. Thinking longer term, quality childcare really is a key ingredient to getting kids off on the right track so they can develop into adults who have fulfilling career opportunities. So longer term, this investment is significant as well. So I'll just stop there.
Great. Thank you, Steve, for that. Before we open it up to some questions and answers from the audience, I'd like to ask the same question, I suppose, of each of you now. And it's this. People on this webinar may be wondering what they or their businesses can be doing to help this childcare challenge, because it can feel so big. A mega issue, and that's a scientific term, I suppose, but it feels so big and it's a big challenge. So what advice would you offer to people watching today that they or their businesses could do? And we'll kind of turn this for those of fans of fantasy sports, we'll do a snake draft and go backwards. And I'll go to Steve, I suppose, with that question first. Steve, what advice would you offer?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. A couple things, and I assume this is for business owners or business operators or managers. Where appropriate, flexibility is huge. I know at our organization, we've got kind of a couple different paths. There are some of our paths at the bank that, you have to be there at scheduled specific times. So flexibility can be a little more limited. But we have evolved tremendously over the past couple of years on this front, and technology has been a big help in that area. But so providing that flexibility to employees, whether it's, we have a lot more part-time schedules, flexible schedules, which helps. We talked a little bit about working moms and others who have some of that burden put on their shoulders. So that's a big part of it. The other thing, and I think it came up earlier, was just thinking about creative ways to co-locate childcare services. I know at the bank, a bit of a happy accident during the pandemic, but out in Gorham, the Gorham Arts Alliance, who provides a lot of childcare services, needed some extra space. We were able to co-locate with them. So again, those are two things that jump to mind, Dan.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Kwame, questions up for you. What advice would you offer about what an individual watching this webinar or their businesses could be doing to help address this challenge?
Okay, thank you. And I think Steve has started us on a good note. I like the flexibility aspects of it. And one thing also that I would add to that is, just for companies to do introspection, basically look within yourself and ask yourself, how best can you support your employees, especially those that are, working parents, to succeed in your organization. And you can think of this sort of more as, in a way, existential thing, because, now childcare is here to stay, and if your company, has provision or flexibility or all the things that they mention in there, it offers you a competitive advantage, in terms of the labor market. Hiring is really tight these days. And so that, on-site childcare is another intervention that I think could work. I know it's quite expensive for businesses to, depending on their size, to invest in that. But of course, sometimes there are collaborations where 2 businesses or 3 businesses can come together, and then establish something within a good location for their staff. We talked about parental leave, flexible hours, remote work, for instance. If companies or businesses are curious, they can go to best place of working parents. If you Google that, it will take you to a site where you can do a 3-minute assessment to determine how family friendly you are. That is an objective metric that would really help you and your staff to sort of do some assessment and determine what basic interventions you can promote in order to ensure that your staff, are happy and also flexible working with you. The second idea would be investing in community pilot concepts and projects such as those that I referenced before. We do have the Bridge to Childcare program, as I said. If you're curious about that, you can contact United Way, and United Way of Southern Maine, would have somebody talk to you about how you can donate and how you can support the program. Recently, I also mentioned about the Business Incubator program. If you're curious about that as well, our partners, we have the coastal counties, Starting Strong, United Way, of course, are all coming together to make sure that these interventions, yield results that would help address some of the childcare crisis that we're seeing. And so please donate, volunteer to these organizations. Recently, we actually, at our meeting, we were talking about, providing laptops for candidates that would participate in the Business Incubator program. So if you have some laptops or you have some money that you can donate to this cause, this is one practical, realistic, thing that you can check off your box. And in a small way, you're helping address the childcare program or crisis in Maine. Of course, folks have also mentioned legislation, and legislations work a lot. And businesses or legislators, are very excited when they hear from businesses and individuals from the community calling them, to advocate for childcare bills or bills that are favorable to childcare. Recently, we do remember the bill LD 1652, and of course, it was sponsored by Speaker Fecto. So please, you can make a call, or you can also join United Way's newsletter or the Chamber of Commerce's newsletter. They follow up on these legislations, advocate for them, and then share the outcome to the larger community. So please, you can sign up for it and get more information on that. Call your local representatives, push for change. So every little thing you can do, helps a lot. So thank you.
Thank you, Kwame. President Cassidy, what advice would you offer about an individual or business getting involved to help play a role in this change?
Absolutely. I endorse everything that Steve and Kwame shared entirely. And actually, I have nothing revolutionary other than to build upon that. It's an obvious approach, but we need to together advocate for state and federal investment in these areas. And something that I think historically maybe got divvied up by the traditional political parties in our country, that there might be supporters on one side for education and others might resist that. Those have dissipated because we do have business at the table. We have social service at the table. We have education at the table, all demonstrating with a voice that is increasingly unified the importance of these investments. And so that importance resonates very well with a number of folks in the political world when you talk about the impact on the individual who receives the education. That same voice resonates very well with some on different parts of the political spectrum when you talk about the economic benefit to investing early in children and their families, making sure that employees can be the full presence that they need to be successful. So I think we have a kind of a unique time that we received. There's good and bad to this period we've been through. And one of the good things that has happened is this has shined a spotlight on the need to invest and grow our network that can support families children and businesses with these types of investments. So, I think Kwame hit it right on the head. Let's be active communicators to our state leaders, our federal leaders, and then let's do those partnerships that we can then turn around and demonstrate to those who hold the purse strings to say, look, this works. And when Steve's talking about the flexibility piece, let's look at co-location. Let's look at all of this and say, here's demonstrated ways to do this. And I think that will draw the investment.
Thanks, President Cassidy. How about you, Matt? What advice would you offer?
Well, I would go back to the reality that Camelia shared, that the vast majority of Maine families have all available adults in the workforce. And the fact is, our policies are not built around that reality. And so I would encourage folks to think about what they can contribute in their role to shift those policies. So it may be folks who are able to engage in advocacy and shift public policies at the local, state, and federal level. There's certainly a lot of opportunities, as folks have suggested, to do that now. This issue is clearly on the minds of policymakers, and there have been some early wins that we can build on. I would direct folks, if you're interested in the public policy opportunities, portlandstartingstrong.org is the website for the Starting Strong Coalition that folks have mentioned. And there is a policy platform that was developed by a coalition, including some of the folks on this webinar, but a broad coalition who sketched out actually a 5-year policy platform to expand access to early care and education. But even short of public policy, I mean, every business sets its own policies. And as you think about your policies and your benefits packages, I would encourage folks to also think about that reality that most of your employees who have children probably have all available adults in the workforce. And so that's the reality that we need to think about our modern policies to support families for whom that's the reality.
Thank you, Matt. And Camelia, what about you? What advice would you offer?
Well, Steve, Kwame, Joe, and Matt have already said many of the same things that I would say. I'd love to just highlight again the flexibility, and patience with families right now. One of the other biggest issues going on, as with everybody else, is the dilemma with finding people to work. And so that's hitting childcare too, and which is just like compounding the issue we have that we're talking about today. And so when parents have to call out because they don't have childcare that day, it may not just be about COVID anymore. And so just flexibility and patience to the business owners anyway, with the employees that they have that are parents. And then just kind of additional thoughts. One thing I think about is how important continuity of care is for a child. And so it's one of the reasons I kind of hesitate around the idea of in-house childcare for businesses, because if a person moves on from that job, they've got to take their child out of the childcare center. And so it's just something to think about. And so one of the things we love, for instance, a lot of our families have subsidies, and they can take that subsidy and go anywhere. It's their choice. It's the family's choice. So making things as much as possible the family's choice, so they can choose the program that works for them. And so if businesses are able to provide families with a stipend to pay tuition for their children, at Youth and Family Outreach, our employees, as part of their compensation package, get 50% off tuition. And so, it makes it so that they can stay at work and be productive and less stressed. And then other people have said this as well: advocate at the national level, state level, community level, and also within your little groups of people. So your friends, your family, share when you hear about something like LD 1652, when you hear about what's going on with Build Back Better, talk to your families and friends about it, and talk about how important the investment in early care and education is, and debunk these age-old messages that if parents are having children, they should be able to stay home with them. These are attitudes and messages and beliefs that are so old, but they're still around. And so, having those conversations with people to debunk those messages would go a long way as well. I think those are the suggestions that I have, in addition to what others have already said that were very important as well.
Thanks, Camellia. Definitely a theme through these answers of what I know sometimes at United Way we call little A advocacy and little P policy, about having those community conversations to get to a point where President Cassidy talked about being more unified than not, rowing in that same direction, and those conversations over coffee, over lunch, whatever they may be, certainly make a difference. We do have a question from the audience, which is about funding childcare centers, in terms of how can childcare centers get funding to help offset the cost of care without taking away child care employee salaries. And I think anyone could answer this if any of you have thoughts about this. Everyone jump right in.
I think that was the guts of the bill that Speaker Fecto put together. It was really to provide salary enhancements to workers to help entice people to join the industry, and also work on getting greater credentials for employees. So that it'd be worth taking a look at that, because I think that's and the hope is that they'll be able to fund that on an ongoing basis.
Thanks, Steve. Other thoughts?
Well, I would add a few things. One is, as I mentioned before, there is the Childcare Subsidy Program, which helps offset the cost of care for income eligible families, which is, and again, there's pretty broad eligibility, so it's a lot of families. And not all providers accept subsidy. So obviously, the more providers who accept subsidy, that helps families with the cost of care without necessarily taking it out on the labor side. The other thing I would say is that we've got a number of grants programs that are coming out of some of the federal relief funds, both some growing childcare grants locally in Portland, as well as state childcare infrastructure grants from the governor's budget. And so there are opportunities where providers can get grants to cover some expenses that relate to infrastructure, again, without having to take that out of their own bottom line.
Thanks, Matt. Anyone else panelists want to offer any insight on that question? All right. Well, I suppose one more question as we look to the clock, and that is, and maybe this will feel like a job interview, and the last question that we tend to ask, I know I do often, is, so do you have any final thoughts? Something you would want to share after your remarks and hearing what other panelists said that comes to mind that you didn't have a chance to share earlier? Any final thoughts? And I'd love to hear from each one of you.
I'll just jump in because, and this is just, I meant to say, if anybody's looking for really, really rich podcasts to listen to right now, No One Is Coming to Save Us is pretty powerful. And they're in their second season right now.
Great. Thanks, Camellia.
I would just add, to me, this is a really complicated, big issue. It was interesting to hear the panelists talk about, sort of a concentrated effort to, approach Augusta with, hey, we need help. But it's also the business community needs to come together to kind of think through strategies to help. So it's a sort of all hands on deck effort that needs to happen.
Thanks, Steve.
And I would pick up on Steve's comment and say, I just reiterate that I'm so enthused and excited and hopeful that we have industry thinking about, various industries thinking about how we can do this together. And that's a wonderful, frankly, it's a very powerful voice at the table. And then the other thing I would say is, if there are folks in our audience or folks who are interested in receiving training, have them reach out to SM. Get great ability to customize programs and see what we can do to help almost anybody. So feel free to call.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would also build on what Steve and Joe said to add that I think it is an all hands on deck moment. And as you can hear, there is no silver bullet for this. It's a systems issue where there are many different pieces we have to work on simultaneously. You know, helping more folks enter the childcare workforce, helping to open more childcare businesses, supporting the childcare businesses that exist, enabling them to expand, working on affordability. And so the good news is in Greater Portland, we've got folks who are working on all those pieces in collaboration and across sectors. So I would just encourage folks to think, whatever your role is, you know, think about what you might contribute to that.
And Kwame here, I would say that for a long time, you know, United States and our state specifically, you know, have struggled, you know, parents have struggled with childcare needs, and there have been so many interventions and advocacy in the past, but none was comprehensive enough until the pandemic hit. And now we're looking at, you know, all the problems sort of unravel. And so I'm excited that, you know, we've at least gone to a point where we can't deny those challenges anymore, but we have to confront them. And I like all the interventions that are being put in place, the policy angle, you know, the program angles, you know. So I'm really excited that at least that awareness is being created, and I ask everybody to support any interventions that you see in the community in service of these goals. And so, once again, as I said, we have the Childcare Incubator program coming off. And if you want to hear more about it, you can always reach out to me. If you call United Way, they can direct you to me, and I'm happy to tell you more about it and ways that you can support some of the programs. Thank you.
Thanks, Kwame. And that's what we have for time today. As our amazing panel has made clear, the issue of childcare is a massive one. The lack of affordable and accessible childcare can hurt children, families, and our employers, and in turn, the economy. And yet, I hope you heard as I did, we have some real reasons for optimism. Perhaps most important is that the need for collaboration across sectors is critical. We must break down some of the barriers without sacrificing quality, and then we can in turn look to scalability. If you want to think about taking an immediate next step, I'll offer 3 quick things, and more information will be sent out to you next week, and there are a lot of resources shared today. The first is you can help kids build their reading skills. And United Way of Southern Maine has a virtual lunch and learn about reader training. And for more information and to register, you could email volunteer@uwsme.org. You heard reference to a childcare business lab that is launching its first cohort in Greater Portland in June to grow the number of in-home family childcare programs at no cost to participants. There'll be 3 information scheduled for later this month and start on Saturday. And for more information, you can reach out to Kwame at Kyaboah, which is YEBOAH, so Kyaboah@uwsme.org. And there's another policy scan that's being done that was born out of some work originally with partners coming together under the Working Communities Challenge. And there'll be a survey that you could fill out that will be part of the email that will be followed up next week. And so please consider filling out that policy scan. I'm going to turn it over to Tommy at this point, and thank you to the panel for today, and thank you to the Chamber for shining a much needed spotlight on this issue.
Well, thanks again to Dan and Quincy and our fantastic panel of leaders for an excellent conversation today. Today's presentation has been recorded and will be available on the Chamber's website and YouTube channel. Keep your eyes out for an email coming soon, which will have a survey and other resources that provide best practices and strategies related to supporting working parents and advancing Thrive2027, so you can take action in your workplace. Keep your eyes out for that follow-up email, which will also provide a link to this recording and other resources that will provide those best practices and strategies. And remember, don't forget to stop by the Chamber's webpage, portlandregion.com. Check out the events calendar for all the upcoming in-person events that are happening this spring, including the ongoing Thrive 2027 Building Thriving Workplaces series. From all of us at the Chamber and the United Way, have a safe and wonderful day.